This is Tabletop Babble, and I'm Amber. Hello! Today on the show, I chatted with game designer April Kit Walsh, who is an absolute delight to chat with. We sat down on April 16th and talked all about her game, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. From the design inspirations to a sampling of the playbooks. We also talked about how she intentionally built safety into the game, as well as what she was most proud of and what was most fun for her during the process. And she also shared a bit about what lies ahead in her game design future. Hi, April, and welcome to Tabletop Babble. For my listeners, if you could, please introduce yourself, who you are, your pronouns, and what you do in the TTRPG space.
Great. Hi, Amber, and thanks for having me on the program. I'm April Kit Walsh. My pronouns are she, her, or gay, gem, and I design games. I design games that celebrate queer existence and love, and are in a variety of play modes. So, Thirsty Sword Lesbians is the recent and very successful on Kickstarter game that is even now showing up in people's mailboxes, and that I'm very excited for. I finally got to see it in hard copy for the first time yesterday, and it's beautiful. It's just so gorgeous, and it's my first RPG book. So I've had like a deck of cards before, but it's just an experience.
I've had other people on talking about their game stuff, and like when they get that first, like their physical, like, oh my god, that experience must just feel so good. Like I get secondhand like tingles for people.
And all the artists are so amazing. So Kanisha Bryant is like the cover and the playbook iconics, but we have a bunch of really great artists who got to draw just very fun queer stuff. It's a game that is tied to the genre of queer action, romance, and found family, but it's not tied to a genre of sci-fi or fantasy or cyberpunk. So sort of you can tell stories in all of those settings. It's a little bit of a fanfic feeling in that regard. It's basically if you want to tell a story in any of those settings but make it gayer, then the rules will help you do that.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on because I kid you not, I feel like the last 6 or 7 people I've had on the show have specifically talked about or mentioned Thirsty Sword Lesbians. And I was like, I gotta get the designer on because this has come up way too many times, and
Aww.
I'm excited for it. I'm also awaiting my copy to come in the mail. So,
well, we were really lucky to have so many great contributors. So in the core book, there are 5 other authors who contributed settings. And then through the Kickstarter, we funded more than 30 stretch goals, and those are all almost done. It might be that if I go check the last GDoc, it's done as we speak, but we've got a little preview of that. So that's a whole other book worth of material that doubles the number of playbooks and has a ton of settings and adventures that are going to go out to the Kickstarter backers in digital form sometime soon as well. But that was so fun to read, right? Like, you make a game, and there's so much there that is fun to read, but you had to write it to make that all real. And then once you get people contributing and collaborating and tweaking and hacking, then you just get to see cool stuff for your game that you didn't have to write. It's really, really fun.
It must feel so good to also like inspire people to create too, to watch it happen.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is very much like the ethos of the Powered by the Apocalypse family of games, right? Like, it's a family of games because it's been friendly to hacking. And that's something that we put explicitly into the licensing for this game so that people are free under the terms of a Creative Commons share-alike license to make and sell their own stuff as long as they contribute it back to the commons. And that's part of giving people the certainty that they need to hack something without being like, well, I know Evil Hat are cool and April's cool. I can probably do this without any problem. I just like to make that clear. And it's definitely also been a positive to involve so many people in the early stages of the project. There are just so many takes on the game that I couldn't have come up with on my own, but I adore them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you were conceptualizing this game, was Powered by the Apocalypse like already at the forefront of I'm going to use this?
It was because I'm a big fan of three different games that did pieces of what I wanted to do. So Masks and Monster Hearts and The Watch all have pieces of bringing deep emotions into play in ways that are evocative or especially thoughtful or really put the narrative focus on something interesting. So those are all Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I also really like the pacing of a Powered by the Apocalypse system that uses dice in the standard sort of distribution of results. And you'll see if you look at Thirsty Sword Lesbians, I explain many times that a low roll is a narrative downbeat. It's not a failure, and it doesn't mean that nothing happens. And that's a core part of Powered by the Apocalypse design that I really appreciate and helps me understand how to do storytelling and also how to do game design in a way that's going to lead to a satisfying pace and fun surprises. And then there are some moves where you sort of tweak that distribution because you want there to be a chance of that happening, but you don't want it to be the same distribution as usual. So the emotional support move is an example where if you spend a string on somebody, you can almost eliminate the possibility of rolling a downbeat. And that's you saying, I really want this moment to go well. And we have this connection that I can lean on that we've established earlier in the fiction. And there is still a chance that things will go awry, but it's much, much smaller now, as opposed to like, we're doing emotional support. We might almost kiss, but I'm very happy if our enemies crash through the window right before that moment and we get interrupted and have to turn and defend each other. That's fun too. So give me those downbeats also.
I love downbeats as well. I think that's one of my favorite things about Powered by the Apocalypse is when I went from like D&D to Powered by the Apocalypse, and I was like, oh, failing can be fun, actually.
Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, you can have characters who meet with adversity or who are flawed. So Fate was my first RPG outside of that like trad gaming world, and the aspect system are just beautifully double-edged so that you are encouraged to signal to the rest of the table what kind of complications or drawbacks or flaws you want to express for your character, and then that's part of the game. It's not, the rest of your D&D table isn't going to criticize you for suboptimal play, but rather part of the game is that you have these multi-dimensional characters, and the game even rewards you mechanically, right? Like you'll get a fate point when your aspect comes into play in a way that complicates things. So you're not even playing suboptimally. The game is giving you permission to enjoy having a character who's flawed. And this is a game about messy lesbians.
You were talking about Masks, Monster Hearts, which is one of my favorite games as well, and then The Watch. And I heard you mention strings, which is, I think, one of those beautiful mechanics that when I first experienced, it's like, I got this. So did you use that in Thirsty Sword Lesbians?
So I adapted elements of all of those games for Thirsty Sword Lesbians. So nothing, you can't just sort of port your knowledge of what conditions mean in Masks over or what strings mean in Monster Hearts. They work a little bit differently. And part of that is also so strings as conceived in Thirsty Sword Lesbians are very double-edged in the sense that they represent having emotional vulnerability towards someone. And that's not always a bad thing, right? They can use that to help you in a way that, Monster Hearts is more focused on that interpersonal drama and those like feral teen angst interactions in a way that's not always as cooperative in terms of the group being all oriented at the same purpose. Whereas Masks is more of a like team RPG. You explicitly have a team mechanic, and the thing that I really liked from Masks is the focus on conditions, emotional states as the stakes of conflict. Because Masks is emulating a superhero genre, and we're not worried about how many hit points Superman has or whatever. We're worried about whether he's lost hope or is angry and what's going to come from that. So the condition system is relatively similar. Support works a little bit differently, but I really wanted to focus in the same way on emotions as the stakes of conflict. And you'll notice, this isn't a superhero game. If you do engage in the fight move, your opponent always gets to choose a consequence for you. There's no I gloriously escape unscathed from this violent interaction. It always takes a toll. And part of that is also because the play loop of getting conditions and then getting emotional support from your teammates to clear them, or if you don't get that support, doing destructive actions to get rid of them yourself is really juicy and really fun. And so the suite of moves that are options in Thirsty Sword Lesbians tend away from things that let you clear conditions without those emotional moments, which is a relatively complex sort of second order bit of game design that makes them feel different than other games where conditions show up. And then in the Watch, there's a lot of focus on social justice as well as the emotional states of the participants, the protagonists. You have a jaded track, and there are beautiful moments that come out of exploring the cost of conflict, but that is a game that tells a much more gritty kind of story. So Thirsty Sword Lesbians is explicitly not a queer misery story. It's a game that celebrates people who are powerful and deserving of love but are flawed, who are sort of over-the-top disaster lesbians doing drama, but it's supposed to be fun as opposed to, now I'm going to tell you about sad queer stories and how tragic it is to be me. Because it's not. Yeah. It's great.
That's good. It's so refreshing because, like, looking at the artwork, like you said, there's some beautiful artwork. It does just seem so joyous. I think as a lot of the art just feels vibrant and exciting and fun, and like that looks like fun, not misery.
Right? I want that hot vampire lady to throw me over a wall and threaten me with a sword.
Okay, so I have to. We've gone right into it. We're talking like 10 straight minutes about Thirsty Sword Lesbians. We dove right in, which is great, and I love it. But I'm sure there are some people who might be listening who may not be familiar with the Thirsty Sword Lesbian kind of like genre trope name. Would you mind just explaining kind of that?
Yeah, I think Sword Lesbian is a meme that I don't know when I first became aware of it, but it's a descriptor of a hot sapphic with a sword who might be someone's D&D character or might be from an anime or a video game or whatever, but you're imagining, what if sapphic? What if this gorgeous sword-wielding, powerful character, were sapphic? And some of that is also playing on the way that queers enjoy RPGs, but that the most common RPGs are not necessarily ones that explore or even friendly to queer themes and communities. And so there are a bunch of people who I've heard from who are changing their campaigns from another system into Thirsty Sword Lesbians because this is what they wanted, and now there's a system that'll support it instead of just sort of tolerating it or making space to do it. This is what we're here for. And then the thirst is absolutely real. These are characters who have strong needs and cravings, and the game definitely can center romance, but it can also center deep emotional need for a different kind of connection. So there are a lot of chosen family and found family stories that are told with Thirsty Sword Lesbians. But those are the elements. I have a 4-page Google Doc of rejected names for this game because I wanted to capture a bunch of different things in that title. Like, it's celebratory, it's action, it's adventure, it's queer, and these people are not perfect. And a bunch of those sort of rejected titles became setting titles, or just they wound up used elsewhere because they encompass a part of what you can do with the game, but not the whole thing.
So I'm glad that you expanded upon like what a thirst is just a craving potentially. It doesn't have to always be romance or sexual in nature, because like for me, I'm being demisexual or on the asexual spectrum. When I first saw Thirsty Sword Lesbians, I'm like, oh, another game that might make me uncomfortable to play because I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff at a table with people. Does your game actually explicitly talk about the different types of quote unquote thirst and other types of play that's not romance facing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm demisexual myself, and the game has definitely, as written, you play it and it assumes that your character craves emotional connection, and there's a flavor of that love and romance aspect to it that is not mandatory but is absolutely supported. And it's important to me to make visible the kinds of sapphic love that are often suppressed in our wider society. And the game centers that while also being welcoming and accommodating of people who are on the ace or aro spectra. And really anyone of any identity. So first of all, Lucian Kahn wrote a supplement, Gaylords, for playing gay male warlords. And there's a little section in the book that says, "What if not lesbians?" And it reveals the great secret that you do not need to play lesbians. You could even try playing a cis-het allosexual person, but don't be surprised if the game makes them gay. And that is a joke. And the truth of it is, the game makes a space where the rules that enforce the cis hetero allosexual norms are less present, and that's all it takes for more people to realize this is something that I'm interested in exploring. So the joke is it will make you gay. The truth is it's going to make a space where the default assumptions have less power. And then there's also the default, there's a basic move that's called entice. And that's when you're appealing to someone's physical or emotional sensibilities. And so it has a flavor of romance or sexual attraction, even though, it's emotional. It could be non-romantic. It could be a different kind of connection. But then there's also a variant replacement or supplement to that move that's just befriend. That's all about making connections. And instead of actions that sound more like personal desire or attraction, it's actions that are about bringing you into a community of theirs. And that's there as another sort of step on that dial, because I don't think there's any set of rules for playing a queer RPG that is going to be universal, because queerness is so broad and diverse, and that's kind of what it means, is that there isn't a single set of rules or defaults that you can go to. So part of my approach to that is bringing in people of a bunch of different identities to write for it. Another part is writing variant moves. And then third is explaining why things are the way they are. So you'll see a lot of detail in the GMing section for people who are interested in writing their own moves or playbooks. And why are there dice? What does XP do? And what are sort of the game design thoughts behind it, so that people who want to modify the game have a head start in sort of understanding how things work and what consequences it's going to have to change it in that way. Because I want people to do that. I'm very excited when people do that.
So outside of the Kickstarter stretch goals and the writing, the supplements, have you started to see people already taking your game and writing things for it?
Yes, there are a bunch of examples that I'm really excited about. So Alexis Sarah, who is one of the contributing authors and also a stretch goal author, she did the Uisa Revolution setting and the Matriarch playbook, is also writing something that she's called Falling Deeper, because Thirsty Sword Lesbians has the Smitten mechanic where whenever your character is smitten and it's always your choice, then you get a little bit of spotlight and you have to answer a question from your playbook about why that's a fraught connection, why that's going to be an interesting plot to explore. And so you're signaling to the table, this is something that I think would be fun, and it ties into the character arc or conflict for your character, because the playbooks are built around a particular emotional conflict or growth arc. So there's that smitten, and then there were a bunch of requests for sex moves. I'm not a big fan of sex moves, but I did write as an optional rule some intimacy moves, and the trigger is when you lower your last guard with someone, and that might mean sex, or it might mean you hang out all night sharing your traumas, but it's supposed to signify a pretty deep vulnerability. And again, those are, instead of like, here's the perk that you get for having done that, it's now ask them this question that's going to be really emotional, see what their answer is, and then there could be some mechanical consequences, but it's definitely not like, yeah, we got to the sex move, now I get a mechanical benefit.
Yeah,
I did it.
+1, 2 things.
Yeah. So in between that space is where Alexis Sarah has been playing with the falling deeper rules, because we will often in a campaign of the game, we'll have a moment where we'll be like, I'm already smitten, right? I want to be smitten again. That was really cute. That was really sweet. That was really hot. I want to be smitten again, but I'm already smitten. And so it is sort of an intermediate step of intimacy, and I think that's really cool. I know that there's at least one person who's doing a different take on one of the stretch goal playbooks that I'm really excited to see. And then I do not know the person who wrote an entire Gideon the Ninth playset for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, where the Cavalier and the 9 houses, or maybe the 8 houses, are all playbooks. So I don't know this person, but I'm delighted that they did this, and I expect to see a bunch of that, because people have such good ideas and very different aesthetics, right? So in the GM chapter, you'll occasionally see, I did it this way because that's what I like in games, and if you don't like that, here is a different way you could do it, but that's up to you.
And you have free reign to do it, because I've opened up my my creative license that you can take it and not worry. That's also really great.
Oh man, I really want to experience the magic of Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm a cave hermit who made an oath never to speak to other people again.
And I want to watch a classic fantasy series, like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, but I can't stand the sight of human faces.
Well, I want to relive the magic of make-believe, the humor of a preschool-aged child, and the genuine camaraderie of nearly 10 years of friendship through only my ears, but I don't know how.
You ignorant fools! You don't even know about Dames and Dragons!
What? But Dames and Dragons? What's that?
Dames and Dragons is a Dungeons and Dragons actual play podcast.
A podcast? So I can experience the spontaneous group storytelling of D&D without breaking my oath of solitude?
That's right.
And I can take part in a rich fantasy storyline without ever having to lay eyes on a disgusting human face?
Never again will the faces plague you.
And it has a cast of 4 female friends who make constant immature jokes as they play?
Absolutely. I would never lead you astray, my friend. Whether you love D&D or just love a good fantasy tale, Dames and Dragons is the podcast for you. Tells the story of 3 unlikely heroes who are chosen to become guardians of the goddess of their world, a floating island by the name of Estra.
By God, that sounds like something I could get into.
Sounds like something I'd love. Sounds like something I'd make.
Well, that's just ridiculous. Dames and Dragons, updated every second Monday wherever podcasts are sold.
So I want to know, what are the core playbooks in Thirsty Sword Lesbians?
Ooh, okay, yeah. So there are 9 of them. Do you want to go through all of them?
Let's just do like maybe a sampling.
Okay, yeah. And I will describe them in the order that they come into my head. So the Trickster is the archetype that craves closeness but fears vulnerability. So they will have disguises and masks and lies and schemes, and they really want to open up to people, but they're afraid to for whatever reason. And they have a little mechanic called too many feelings, where as they conceal these things that they feel, it can bottle up, and there are ways to express some. If you secretly do something nice for someone, that gets you a little bit of a reduction of the feelings. But if you get too many feelings, which it turns out is four feelings is too many, then you have an outburst. You just scream out the things that you've been holding inside, or you act on it, or whatever, and you can play the Trickster in a couple of different ways. You can be really reserved and carefully manage your feelings and never let it go too far, or you can just have the outburst and then be have your emotional reaction to having done that. And so that's one playbook, right?
I'm laughing, and April's probably seeing me shaking my head and looking down. I was like, wow, the first playbook you said sounds like a playbook I would play.
Good. Well, hopefully we've got 8 more of those. So the Devoted is essentially the toxic self-sacrifice playbook. This is the character who really ought to do more self-care, but is really, really good at taking the hits for her friends and for helping them be with someone other than themselves, and is all about this devotion to a cause. And it's a pretty flexible playbook as well, in the sense that you can be devoted to something that's actually pretty good. Or you can be devoted to a particular person or god or sexy dragon who's really bad for you, and lean into that kind of toxic relationship to the extent that you want to. So those are choices that you make when you pick the moves for your character, when you define your devotion, and when you define what 3 tenets of your devotion you have trouble adhering to. So that can be a really fun playbook, because the character might think that they're going to be the tank and take all the hits and just protect everybody, and that will take a huge toll on you. The only time I ever marked all my conditions in a one-shot was playing a Devoted who was approaching things that way. Like, no, I'm the one who's going to be bearing the brunt of all this, but that's not actually sustainable. And sort of one of the arcs of the Devoted can be learning to do self-care or accept other people doing things for you as well. So that's a fun one. And then I have to talk about the Scoundrel, because people adore the Scoundrel. So the Scoundrel is the one who isn't as good at connecting in necessarily an empathetic way, but is very good at provoking people into doing things that they find unwise but really want to do. And the Scoundrel is that provocative character who has a move, who can, when she narrowly evades a blow or takes a blow, can have her clothes rip. And then, like, there are perks if people become smitten with her, and NPCs will get excited about that. So she is just very extra, very dramatic. But part of making a Scoundrel is asking, like, why are you like this? Because the Scoundrel's fundamental conflict is about seeking new horizons versus loyalty or investing in a community. And there are a lot of different ways that you can answer that question. All of the playbooks are designed to have a fun growth opportunity, right? Like, no one is expected to be a perfect person. You're expected to, generally be protagonists and likable, but the expectation is that your character is growing over the course of exploring their playbook. And then once you've done that with your character, you have the opportunity to advance into another playbook. If your Trickster learns the value of being vulnerable with their friends and overcomes that fear, they might evolve into something else. They might become the Spooky Witch, who is all about advocating for people who are seen as monsters. And the expectation is that you'll play a character, if you're playing for a campaign, if you're playing about 6 to 10 sessions, you might do it all with one playbook. If you're playing, 9 to 15 sessions, you'll probably go through 2 playbooks. And so you can continue to tell the story of your character's evolution.
I was gonna say, so is advancement the getting new playbooks and that, or is there a different advancement system inside of Thirsty Sword Lesbians?
Yeah, each playbook has its own advancement options where you're taking more playbook moves or changing your stats or taking moves from other playbooks, which is the way you implement concepts that don't perfectly line up with just one playbook, is you play one and grab moves from another. And then when you're done with that playbook, you can either live happily ever after, or you can switch to another playbook, and then all that you keep is you get one free move from your previous playbook, but otherwise it's essentially a starting character in terms of stats and options, and you are tackling a new emotional arc and a new dimension of the same character.
I have to ask, as the creative process of Thirsty Sword Lesbians, I have lots of questions, but I think my most, I would like to know is maybe 2. Maybe they're the same thing. What was something that you were, the most proud of that you made in this game, and what was the most fun for you to work on?
So, let's see. What am I most proud of? I think in terms of game design, I'm really proud of all the playbooks, but I'm also proud of that smitten move, which I talked about a moment earlier, that lets you sort of focus on what makes those relationships interesting and fraught to pursue. I'm also really proud of the way that the safety considerations are built into all of the mechanics. So there's no role to overcome an NPC's free will and make them do your thing. But if you find a way to make them care about what you think in the form of a string, or to understand them, then you can often find a way to persuade them. And that's all subject to safety tools, of course, but safety tools are like the 3rd or 4th layer of ensuring safety, in your experience of the game. So I'm pretty proud of the way that the game does something that I think is really important to do, especially in a story about intimate emotional connection, which is to respect consent and autonomy at each step of the rules. So you're telling a story where things might happen to your character that are tragic or upsetting. They might get these negative emotional conditions, but people are going to feel real, feel like they have autonomy, and that you won't have that sort of gross feeling of an NPC being controlled by a die roll into a romantic or intimate kind of situation. You have to approach NPCs as people in this game as you interact with them.
That's awesome. I immediately am thinking back into my D&D days of all those charm person and suggestion, which the only times I ever used those spells was when I played, funny enough, an evil aligned character.
Yeah. Doing kinky mind control stuff is an advanced technique not covered in the core book. It's unfortunately something that comes up and ruins people's days in some RPGs that I do my best to design around, right? So my philosophy around safety is that the most important thing is the culture at your table, which is who you have at the table, and whether people are feeling safe and have the tools to communicate. And the words on the page can't dictate that, right? I can't give that to you. I can title my game Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which to my mind attracts the kind of people I want to play with and repels people who are going to say that's not a game they want to play. So that's my first gift to players who are excited about Thirsty Sword Lesbians. But then you need to establish the culture of safety, and it needs to be built into the mechanics of the game. And those sort of explicit safety tools like the check-in or the whichever safety tools you're using, Xcard or script change or what have you, are sort of like the last line of protection that you have that are important and but can't do their job on their own without some other things present. So going into writing a game that is looking to explore meaningful themes that people are going to have feelings about, absolutely wanted to layer on ways of engaging with those experiences that are going to feel good and positive and cathartic and build connection instead of being a bad experience.
Safety tools is something that I have talked about a couple times with other people already too, where it's nice to see this happening now, where before, it wasn't built into games. It wasn't even talked about, like how to have a conversation, what even role-playing means, And so it's really like, even when I was looking through Thirsty Sword Lesbians, you can tell how it's structured, the way that the book reads and the moves read and everything you're going through, that safety is inherently built in, which is something that I appreciate. And obviously lots of people appreciate and have wanted because it's doing so well. So this is me clapping to you, April.
Thank you. And I think that all of the artists contributed to that feeling as well, right? You get a diversity of body types and skin tones and body types, not just in terms of weight, but also what configuration of secondary quote unquote sex characteristics people have who get to be lesbians in this setting. And from the cover on, we are signaling this is not, it's called Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and it's not for the male gaze, it's for the lesbians, and it's also for the broader queer community. We're going to center this one identity that's really important to me and is often erased or misportrayed, but we're also going to be a very queer game that is flexible and can encompass other queer identities as well, and we are not going to be compromising in the interest of being palatable to an audience that is not excited about that queerness.
So we talked a bit about what you were proud of working on Thirsty Sword Lesbians. What was fun for you?
I really enjoyed playtesting, obviously. Maybe that's not obvious. Maybe not everyone feels that way, but I like playing the game and making notes and seeing, what things work, what things get interpreted in a way that I didn't think of, and maybe I need to change something, or maybe that's just really exciting, and I love that. And that's part of why I'm excited about designing in the medium of RPGs, because people bring to it so much of themselves that then they are able to share with each other or with me. It's not sort of a one-to-many experience. It is a facilitation of a many-to-many experience of people collaborating. So that collaboration is really fun. And I also... You're going to be able to tell when you read the book that there are parts that I just had a lot of fun writing, like the glossary or the suggested flirt ideas, and some of it also, if not fun, was still really meaningful to write. So there's a little section towards the end about ways that several of the playbooks specifically can connect to trans narratives. And there is no single playbook that is the trans playbook, but there are playbooks that explore different aspects of that experience. And so writing that was more meaningful than it was fun, but also people's reactions to it have been very heartening as well. So I think seeing how the game goes out into the world and bounces around and becomes new things and delights people, and when people write in to say that the game got them a girlfriend, that's just my favorite.
I know, I've been seeing on Twitter stuff coming up. You're like, oh, this is so wonderful.
Well, and the first fan art was a moment for me, because we hadn't commissioned any art besides what I had done before signing on with Evil Hat. Chelsea Geeter had done a really cool scoundrel for my itch version, but then people were making fan art of this game that 100 some odd people bought it on itch and had it like at the very earliest stages, but then I got to see them actually playing. And so that experience of people playing it who I didn't know, I did not cause this to happen, I'm not in this game, but people are playing it and telling stories and drawing their cool lesbian pirates. I love it.
Oh, such a good feeling. So my question going forward is, what's next? Or actually, you know what? No, do I want to go back into the past or do I want to go forward to the future? We're at a crossroads here. Because is this your first like foray into game design? Like, is this your first, like, this is my idea, here it is, it's come to fruition? Or was there stuff before TSL?
So before Thirsty Sword Lesbians, I've been playing and running games. Actually, I've been running games since the second grade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I used to play the old Star Wars with all the D6s on the school bus with 3 friends, and I ran it. I recently found my notes, and it's crudely drawn like Imperial war machines with stats next to them, arrayed in like comic book format. So this is what baby April was doing in second grade. And then, a couple of little projects, but I think only after getting introduced to indie game design did I start like playing around with the more narrative focused mechanics that really excite me. And so my first game that I would say is part of like the current April corpus of work is End of the Line, which is a game where you are the crew of a sentient vessel on the way to being scrapped, and you are going to be asked to say goodbye. So it's a For the Queen hack that introduces the possibility of multiple ending cards, and is very, very queer and feelingsy. Like, you are literally, your home is a person who is not always seen as a person and is about to be no longer in existence if the authorities have their way. And so all along the journey, you're building up your relationship with your vessel, with one another. And it honestly, it goes about half and half, whether people are like, hell no, you're not taking away my beloved space whale, we're going to go rogue, or, I think it might be time for racist space grandpa to go. He was built for the war and has never adjusted, and it's sad, but this is the end of the line. So that was my first game, just a little light giggle.
Just a little stroll through a well-lit park day, sunny, bright, puppies everywhere. My facial reactions when you first said that, I hope you enjoyed. Like, I'm smiling, yes, end of the line, sentient spaceship, it's going to be scrapped. No!
Yeah, absolutely. Big content warning for end-of-life decisions with that one. So yeah, and so otherwise like little projects, and then coming next, I have 2 things that are sort of at the fore of what I'm going to be working on, which one of them is another spaceship game, but it's more cozy and less alarming, maybe. So this is a cozy game about a sentient spaceship and their crew, who are all interdependent in different ways. So like the engineer has a different relationship with the spaceship than the navigator or what have you, but they're sort of an interdependent little family that goes and have space adventures. And that is going to be a distributed GM system that I'm working on, that's going to use little cards for roles and prompts and so on. So not GM-less, but not single GM either. And then, and that will be called I Will Carry You. And then I'm also working on Dream of Us, which, while also a feelings game, is different from all the others because it has a tactical element to it. So you roll like a pool of dice and you place them on your cards and activate different abilities. So that's another original system that I've been working on that we play tested a couple months ago. So it works. It's not good yet, but eventually it will be. And that's how games work.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah.
It's a process. Well, April, if people want to find your work online, how could they do that?
Yeah, so my games imprint is Gay Spaceship Games. So if you go to gayspaceship.com, it will take you to my itch. I am Gay Spaceship GMS on Twitter. And for Thirsty Sword Lesbians things in particular, you can go to swordlesbians.com or sword.gay. They will keep redirecting to whatever the latest locale is. This is going to air at a time when maybe we will have pre-orders back up for TSL. We just closed pre-orders at the end of March and are doing fulfillment, but the street date for TSL is June 7th, around the start of Pride Month, and there will be pre-orders before that as well that will coincide with that release date. I am hoping to get together with a couple of vaccinated friends and go to my friendly local gaming store and see my game on the shelf and jump up and down in delight on June 7th. And hopefully if it's safe to do so, then you can do that too.
Yes. If it's safe to do so and it's out in your game stores, everyone go check out Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and also go find April online and check out all of her work. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on, April.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. You can find me on Twitter at RocketOrca, Kenny as at Volfmir, and John is at Crossways GM. Tabletop Babble is part of the Geekspective Network. Go to geekspective.com to check out all our other shows or follow us on Twitter at Geekspective. Our theme music was provided by the Battle Bards.